Welcome back to my house. I'm so excited. We're almost at Christmas and I've got a few things to show you before we get into our lesson today. These are some items that I have done for myself or that I have done for other people quilting, and they're just so lovely I had to share. So let me share the first one with you. This is a very unusual piece. This is a piece that was, I did this myself, but the pattern is by Laurel, and if you know her work, she does a lot of what's called cut and paste kind of method of sewing. And then you sew over everything and then you quilt over everything. And the reason I wanted to share this with you is this is extremely tight quilting. I don't know how well you can see this quilting, but that is about as tight as you can get. And if you can see the pattern, it's a swirl, swirl, and then kind of a little diamond star shape. It's probably really difficult to pick that up. But this has been so fun to make, and I finally got it finished and just wanted to share it with you because it made me really happy. The second piece is a piece that I quilted for a friend. And of course it's bigger, but I wanted to show how sometimes when you have a very angular quilt, if you put some motion or different angles in your quilting, it softens it and it makes your quilt come alive just a little bit more. And this quilt came alive so beautifully that I wanted to share it with you. The colors are so vibrant, they're just fun, and with the quilting the way that it is, it's just about perfect. So there, I've shared a couple of those with you today, and let's go on to the last one. Hi, Lottie and I wanted to show you our Christmas Advent because I've been working on this for so long and it has been so much fun, and I'm finally just finishing the binding and putting on the numbers. So let me share that with you just a minute. This Advent has 25 days, and I think what's unique about the Advent is that the pockets are fully lined. You can put little articles in here, or you can put little notes, but the fabric is very, very fun. It's an older fabric line. This was so fun to make with the rickrack and all the trims and everything that there was. The back of the quilt has numbers on it, so it's very adventy. And at the top of the quilt, on the back, there is a place for you to put a rod through that. But I just really wanted to share this because I just think it's such a cute piece, and it gives you an idea about someday the things that you can make for quilting for your home and for your holidays. So just thanks for sharing with me. Welcome back. If you remember, we've already done a lot to get our quilt ready. We're on step 3 now. The first step was that we planned and prepared, we got everything ready so that we were organized, and we set up our full plan. And we accomplished what we said we were going to accomplish, so that's great. The second one was to plan the top of this quilt so that we liked the way that it looked. Well, I've done that. I sewed first my rows together, and then I sewed it in columns going down or vertically. I have 6 pieces going across and 7 pieces going down. I've used my whole layer cake and it looks lovely. I'm very, very happy with the result. This will be great. I wanted to show you how it looks on the back. It's relatively clean, but you can see that you're going to have things like strands of thread. You may have even some fray or some little fluff from what has, come off the back. It's good to clip these off so that when you put it, you put the 3 layers together, that this isn't on the inside, because it can show through to the front of your quilt and it doesn't really look as pretty if you haven't cleaned it up. So clean up all of these different things. What you shouldn't do is don't ever take your threads and just pull them. You need to take scissors and clip them so that you've just left a little bit of a tail, or you've left a little bit of thread, but you do not want to pull your threads. You can undo your stitching and cause problems. So you notice that there's a bunch of threads right here. I'm just going to clip, but I'm going to leave a teeny bit. What you don't want is you don't want a really long piece of thread hanging on behind your project. So I'm just gathering those together so that I call it cleaning up the back. Okay, there's a really long one there. The other thing that I'm doing visually while I'm doing this is I'm making sure that if there's any places that I didn't get stitched, sometimes you can see a gap in that, and you can take care of it before you go on to the next step. I've already really checked that, and I know there's no gaps. I know I'm not going to have any problems. The next thing I'm going to have to do though now is I'm going to have to take this quilt, which is 70 inches long by 60 inches wide, and I am going to have to iron all of the rows that I put together. I'm going to have to iron everything one way going up so that everything lays flat and nice. When I go to quilt it, I don't have a bunch of things going different ways. So I'm going to go to my iron and iron all of these rows up. I've already done some of that. You can see that, you know, this is a pretty clean back and it's a pretty organized back. Your back doesn't need to look awful. It needs to look really nice still. And you should organize your sewing so that it does look, you know, orderly and nice, and it's not going to be bumpy and humpy when you go to put the quilt together. After I iron all this and I'm ready to go, I'm needing to figure out what I'm going to put in my sandwich of quilt. And in my sandwich of quilt, I have to have a back layer to the quilt. I have to have batting, which is a soft, pliable, warm material that stabilizes all of your layers together. And then, of course, I'm going to have the quilt top. And then that sandwich, as we call it, comes together with the quilting that you decide to put on your quilt. When I ordered this fabric, I liked all of the lines so much that I ordered different fabrics from the line to be able to put on the back, and I could not decide for the life of me which one I wanted. I finally did decide which one I wanted, and I've got it partially ready to go. I decided on this because it was the brightest, and I like red a lot, so that's why I chose this. So I know that my quilt going long-wise is 70 inches long, and going across it's 60 inches wide. When you buy fabric, your fabric typically is in 45-inch widths. And so you have to get a piece that's long enough, and then you have to get a piece that's wide enough. So sometimes you have to take fabric and you'll have to sew a seam down the back so that your fabric is wide enough. You usually can get the length just by buying enough yardage, but the width will be the thing that you'll have to worry about. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. 70 inches long means that I have to have at least 2 yards, 72 inches of fabric to fit on the back of this quilt. Okay, so I've already measured this. This is 2 yards of fabric, 72 inches, and it will be long enough to fit on my quilt. You can see that. However, you can also see, just straighten this out a little bit for you. You should also see that it's not wide enough. What you have to do is, with extra fabric that you have, you'll make a seam and you'll add fabric so that this will be wide enough. And I'll show you how to do that on the sewing machine. But I've already cut these strips so that once I add this to it, I have enough fabric for the backing. Now that's a pretty rough way of looking at it, but that gives you the general idea. But you've got to have backing that will cover a little bit more than the front of the quilt. I usually say that you have to have 4 inches more all the way around the quilt. So if my quilt is 60 inches across, I have to have 64 inches of fabric that come across. If my quilt is 70 inches long, I have to have 74 inches minimum long. And you're saying, well, that seems like a waste of fabric. It's not a waste of fabric because you will have in between, remember that batting, and that batting will make it so that everything needs to have a little give and take in the quilt. And when you go to quilt it, sometimes it can shift and it can move. And really what you want to do is you want this to be smooth and nice and not lumpy and bumpy. And so you give it a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of extra room so that things are really good for you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take these pieces and I'm going to make a seam right here so that the width of my fabric is going to be wide enough for the quilt back. And I'm going to my sewing machine and do that right now. Here we are, ready to make our back. Let me show you something though that I think is really important for you to know. I am going to be sewing on what's called the selvage of the fabric, which is the end of the weaving process. You'll notice that on both sides, can you see that white little area? That's called the selvage. This is the back of the fabric. This is what it looks like on the front. Usually it has the name of the fabric printed on it. I am not going to sew right on that selvage because that selvage is tighter than the fabric weave itself. So I'm going to sew down the line of that selvage right along there and go off of the selvage because you want to get on your fabric, not on your selvage. So I'm going to take a 1/2 inch, not a 1/4 inch, but a 1/2 inch seam going down my fabric, and my foot is going to be running down that selvage so that it's not over, my sewing is not over here on the selvage edge. I'll show you that as I go along. So put that down, the foot will be down right on the edge of the selvage, and I have set my sewing machine so that I will get a bigger seam allowance going down. So here we go. Oops, wrong stitch. Is that better?
Yeah.
Now let me stop just a second so that you can see, and I put dark thread on the back so that you can see that. Can you see here is the selvage, and a 1/2 inch from that is where I'm sewing to get the seam, okay? And I will continue that all the way down. And I'm doing something that I've told you not to do, so please don't do it. I should be taking out my pins as I go along. Remember I told you don't sew over your pins? And I just did it, so sorry about that. Keep your 2 edges over here. Keep your 2 selvage edges together. And I think that gives you a good idea what's going on. I'm not going to continue with that, but when I finish, I'm going to have a very big piece of fabric that's going to go on the back of my quilt. And it's good I stopped because guess what? I'm out of bobbin thread. Let me open this seam for you so that you can see what I'm talking about. There are your selvages right here. Here you can see what I'm talking about. There's a selvage here, there's a selvage here. And if you were to measure this, I'm 1/2 inch in from that selvage so that I'm not catching any selvage in my stitching. Okay? You see how wide that is? And you can also see pretty well the selvage. Do not use your selvage as part of your fabric. It's not the same as fabric. It's the very end of your fabric. Okay, when I finish this, I am going to cut down part of my selvage and cut it off and get rid of it. And I say cut down because I'm not going to cut the whole thing off. I don't need to. But I'm going to cut down a lot of the selvage because I don't want it and I don't need it as part of my quilt, so that I have a nice 1/2 inch seam allowance, and that I will press to one side like we did our rows and our columns, and it doesn't matter which side you press it to, but then you'll have this ready to go. I need to talk to you about batting so that next time when we get together, you will have chosen your batting, and I have some definite suggestions for you so that you'll be happy with your end product, especially with a very first quilt. So here's some different types of batting. I've just brought little pieces for you to see, but this batting is a nice batting. It's a cotton batting, and you can buy it at any quilt store. You can buy it at Hobby Lobby. You can buy it by the yard. You can purchase it over the internet. This is warm and natural, and it, like I said, it's 80% cotton and 20% polyester. It's something that's used traditionally in making quilts. This is a very, very nice batting, very, very soft, and the drape is wonderful on this. In other words, the way a quilt would fall and look. But this is 1/2 and 1/2. It's cotton, 1/2 and 1/2 with bamboo. And it's very soft, it's very, very nice, it's very breathable. It's also more expensive. So, depending on what you want, you'll pay quite a bit more per yard for the bamboo than you will for the cotton polyester blend. You'll also see packages like this several places in the store. This is what they call a quilter's polyfill batting, and it's an 80-20 blend. I'm not going to pull it out because it gets all over the place. I'm going to suggest to you that you do not use something like this right now, and the reason I'm not wanting you to do that is because this is fluffy, it's hard to work with, it's bumpy when we're making a quilt that we're going to be making with a domestic machine. If you want a fluffy, big, poofy quilt later on, we'll talk about using different battings, but please don't get this for your first quilt. They're great for other things, but not for this first quilt. The other thing I would suggest that you do not use is do not get a wool batting. You can buy battings in bags like this at Hobby Lobby, at Michael's, at different quilt stores. If you're fortunate enough to have a good quilting store by you, it would be good for you to go in there and tell them what you're doing and have them suggest something. On the internet, you can also get a product that's called Pellon, and it's just a very thin, nice little batting. What the batting does is two things. It stabilizes your quilt so that it stays together nicely in 3 layers. And you're going to be making a design as you quilt on the top of this quilt, and you want it to have some loft to it or something that shows your quilting. Like the quilts that I just showed you, the designs on the ones that you saw at the first of this. It decorates your quilt. Even though we have nice fabrics and we have nice designs, the quilting makes the quilt look absolutely beautiful and makes it a final good product. So whatever you do in choosing your batting, just make sure that you've got enough and that it's something that you're going to be able to work with. And this wouldn't be my choice at this point in time. That's our program for today. I'm just excited. This is the Christmas week, so I'll see you next week and we'll put our quilt together, the 3 layers together. We will make sure that it's ready to quilt and we'll start quilting it. And hopefully by next week it will be totally completed. I appreciate you. I hope you have a wonderful holiday and that you continue to create and have fun. This is a great project to do, and it shouldn't be stressful. It should only be fun. So make it that way and enjoy yourself. Thank you.